Today we're looking at the new embiggened Space Marine land speeder, the Storm Speeder Hammerstrike. Let's see what all of these guns can do. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're looking at the datasheet for the Storm Speeder Hammerstrike, one that was given to us by Warhammer community in the preview when they did their codex show the other week. It's been good to actually get a proper picture of this thing, seeing as we had it in potato blurry cam quite so early on. And you can tell it's very much an updated reimagining of the land speeder design, with a few nods to the updated Primaris vehicles, including those grav plates, which I guess the original land speeder was kind of an inspiration for in itself. For the most part I do quite like the model. It's pretty much a flying brick as you'd expect for the Adeptus Astartes, though I have to admit I'm not sure I would have included that third crew member there, the one with his head nestled in between the missile launcher. He can't help but just look a bit cute when he's poking his head up like that. In any case, we're going to take a look at the Hammerstrike datasheet for the Storm Speeder, talk about its positives and negatives, any obvious in-game synergies, and then compare it to some other options. So the Storm Speeder Hammerstrike is a fast attack choice for Codex Space Marines, and its 9 power level as per this datasheet, which usually as per Games Workshop's translation would mean it's going to be somewhere around the 180 points mark. Could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more. But in any case, as things go, compared with the standard land speeder, this thing's going to cost quite a lot more points. Its stat line is pretty much that of a beefed up land speeder, as you might expect. It's got a movement of 16, weapon skill and ballistic skill of 3+, strength 5, toughness 6, 10 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 7 and a 3+ save. From the stat line, the first thing that jumps out at me is that it's very fast indeed. A massive 16-inch movement means it's going to get where it needs to be, and could potentially set up quite a long way back to keep it out of enemy firepower range. It's quite nice that it has weapon skill 3, and in an absolute pinch if it really needed to, you could potentially rely on it to kill a last light infantry model or something if it was say on an objective. However, for a points cost in this ballpark, it's really quite fragile. Toughness 6 and 10 wounds really doesn't go all that far. It's going to fold very quickly to any dedicated anti-tank firepower, and also be susceptible to lighter weapons such as autocannons, which are really going to chew it up no problem. Compared with a lot of the new Space Marine units, this thing really isn't all that tanky, so it needs its weapons to really make up for that and be very, very hard hitting indeed. Finally, one thing to note is that it does degrade, which other similar things in the same role such as land speeders, attack bikes and the Invader ATV all don't. So even if it does survive on 1 or 2 wounds, then it's going to be pretty underwhelming, as you're only going to be hitting on 5s and moving quite slowly. In terms of its Wargear, the Storm Speeder Hammerstrike brings all the anti-tank weapons, as opposed to the Hailstrike, which is the more anti-infantry variant, and the Thunderstrike, which does also bring some anti-tank, but also has those Icarus rocket pods for trying to take down air targets. It's armed with 2 unique bits of Wargear in the Hammerstrike missile launcher, which is a 36-inch range heavy 2 weapon with strength 8, AP-3 and a flat damage 3. It's kind of reminiscent of the Cyclone missile launcher, slightly shorter range than standard missiles, but it's got better AP, flat damage 3 rather than D6, and also no frag mode. In general I do prefer to fire crack missiles over frag missiles, but it's always nice to have the flexibility in a pinch. In any case, a fairly solid all-round anti-tank weapon. It backs that up with a Melter Destroyer, which is the front-mounted tri-barreled multi-melter, and this one has the exact stats that you'd expect to go along with that. It's heavy 3, 24-inch range, strength 8, AP-4, damage D6, and it has the new melter rule, which means that if you're making an attack within 12-inch range of it, then it goes up to D6 plus 2 damage rather than just D6. Finally, it's got a pair of Crackstorm grenade launchers, which are 18-inch range Assault 1 weapons, strength 6, AP-1 and damage D3, which are kind of incidental to the damage output of the vehicle, but if it does happen to be nearby any enemy units, then they can always just chip into the damage. At long range at 24 inches, it'll average around about 7 wounds on a toughness 7 vehicle, though it can be fairly swingy in damage output just due to that D6 damage out of the Melter Destroyer. If you do get within 12-inch range though to use that melter rule, then it does jump up considerably. You'll be looking at more sort of 10 wounds on a toughness 7 vehicle on average. Ideally this thing does want to be as close as possible to the enemy up to 12-inch range, where it will deal some very decent damage, but it does mean that it's at pretty great risk of reprisals with that fairly fragile stat line. In terms of special rules, it has Angels of Death for combat doctrines, shock assault and the rest. I wouldn't say that doctrines are super important to this, it already has very good AP on its main weapons, so the Devastator doctrine doesn't exactly make the biggest deal in the world. It's quite nice to see that it becomes Ravenwing if it's in the Dark Angels chapter. That'll unlock a whole ton of synergies, including being able to jink, and a lot of very cool stratagems and synergies that they managed to get from their Ritual of the Damned book. It does have the chance of exploding if it dies, and out of the keywords, it's interesting to note that it doesn't have that core unit keyword, which means that it's not going to be able to get rerolls from things like captains now. It's perhaps not the worst for the Storm Speeders though, as they're likely to be operating quite independently with that great movement. In terms of synergies with certain chapters, most of them have at least something to offer for this guy. Ultramarines' fall back and shoot could be pretty handy to stop it getting locked up in close combat, as it will be wanting to get close. White Scars have plenty of good tactics for fast moving units, such as being able to advance and shoot as if it were an assault weapon, and also a stratagem to fall back and shoot as well. Salamanders are going to be very solid for damage output. A single wound reroll each time will really help when you're rerolling the wounds on such powerful shots. And of course +1 to wound with that Melter Destroyer is going to be very helpful. Iron Hands can increase its durability somewhat, as well as having it degrade a bit slower, which is always helpful. Imperial Fist getting Ignores cover and the Tank Hunter stratagem could both be helpful on this guy. And Dark Angels, as we mentioned, having access to all the options that the Raven Wing have is no bad thing at all. In terms of character synergies, we're going to have to wait and see exactly what sort of characters can interact with non-core units. I think it's a pretty safe bet that Tech Marines will be able to repair this guy, though honestly I'm not sure how often it has come up. They're generally best off buffing slow moving units like things in their own gunline. In terms of stratagems, I'm sure some things will be changing in the new Codex Space Marines. I'll be looking to see if the Skilled Rider stratagem gets a bit of an update. Could be very handy in White Scars for getting a 4+ or even 3+ invul save on this guy. It would go a very long way to mitigating incoming enemy fire. In terms of in-game use, just from the stat line alone, I think that you're really going to want to get the first strike with this guy and not having shot down first, which you could do in one of either two ways. Either just have absolutely loads of pressing threatening units that are moving up the board quickly, then with a bit of luck at least some of your threats, including maybe this guy, might get through, or potentially hide him back somewhere in the back of your deployment zone, hopefully outrange any of the enemy's guns turn 1, and then jump forward with that excellent 16-inch movement to unleash its missiles and melter payload. You could also potentially think about using strategic reserves as well. He does fit very nicely into it with power level 9, so for one command point you could have a Storm Speeder turning up on the enemy's flank, hopefully within range of that Melter Destroyer. Could potentially be one way of guaranteeing him getting a decent amount of damage off. As he's moving about the board, I probably wouldn't worry too much about those Crackstorm grenade launchers. I'd say it's more about getting those big missiles and the Melter Destroyer in range, and it might well just be worth hanging back a bit more if it does make the difference between keeping him safe or having him die. Between the new and old Space Marine units, there's now really quite a lot of options in the Space Marine fast attack slot for fast moving units dealing multi-melter death. If Land Speeders, Attack Bikes and Invader ATVs all remain the exact same points cost despite the multi-melters getting better, then they're all looking very scary indeed. This thing's definitely going to get compared to the standard Land Speeder, as they're basically filling the same role. The standard Land Speeder can get a multi-melter and a Typhoon missile launcher for 110 points. Point for point, it's similarly or maybe even a little bit more fragile, but you do get a little bit more anti-tank firepower out of the equivalent point in Land Speeders. The classic Land Speeder could be one to watch going into the new Codex. Attack Bikes are also looking very good. 155 points will get you 3 of these with multi-melters, which at least on paper seems to be a better deal than the Storm Speeder. They've got more anti-tank shots, a whole ton of bolter shots on top of that, better in close combat, and also pretty similarly tough, as they have more wounds but at toughness 5. Finally there's the other new fast mover on the block, the Invader ATV. This will cost you 170 points for 2 of them, packing 2 multi-melters and a whole bunch of bolt shots again. These guys are far tougher than the Storm Speeder are, and they don't have any degrading profile, but they do have a slight bit less anti-tank firepower. In general, in terms of pure competitiveness, it does seem that the other fast attack options do stack up very well against it. At the moment, maybe Attack Bikes might even be the way to go. Of course, this could all change with the release of the Codex. It's going to be good to see how they're balanced, and of course how it stacks up against the other Storm Speeders, which we don't know the exact profiles for yet. So let me know what you think of the new Storm Speeder down in the comments below. What sort of points cost would have you playing this thing, and would 180 be a bit much for just how fragile it is? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics for plenty more 40k discussion like this. Finally, if you have been enjoying a lot of the videos and would like to help support the channel, I'd just like to mention that I have a Patreon page which you can find a link to down in the video description. The channel's Patreon is how I can keep on making quite so many videos, so if you are enjoying regularly, then any support is massively appreciated. Channel patrons get to see one video early each week, there are regular votes to see what sort of things come next, and you also get automatically entered into the channel's prize draw each month, with a chance to win some big kits. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.